Finally having found success with The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and receiving countless amounts of fan mail, will L. Frank Baum return to the land of Oz? Hello, my name is Cody Goggin. Welcome to the Royal Historian of Oz. Thanks to the far-reaching success of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and its subsequent stage adaptation, the Baum family found themselves taking lavish vacations across Egypt, Greece, Italy, and North Africa. During this time, Maud wrote letters to family on her trips, which Baum would later turn into the book, Other Lands Than Ours. The Baum family also moved from Chicago to Hollywood in 1910, buying a home that they called Oscott. Frank later filled an entire wall of the house with his favorite photographs of Maud, which he called A Yard of Maud. Baum's next children's book would be Dot and Tot of Maryland, and would again feature artwork by W. W. Denslow. It was first published in 1901, but the book was not met with great success, and Denslow and Baum's relationship deteriorated as a result. They would never work together again. L. Frank Baum would release a Christmas-themed book next, called The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. The book was illustrated by Mary Cowles Clark and released in 1902 to modest success. It would go on to be adapted into a Rankin Bass special, a graphic novel, and even an anime series. But despite these new books, Baum continued to receive enormous amounts of fan mail from children and fans alike, begging him to return to the land of Oz. Though hesitant to write a sequel, Frank ultimately decided that a second Oz book could be his path back into the theater. So, it was that he set about writing what would become the second Oz book, The Marvelous Land of Oz. Due to the Tin Man and Scarecrow having been a larger part of the stage version of the first book, they were made the focus of the sequel. It would even feature a dedication to Fred Stone and David Montgomery from the theater production, who played the characters respectively. The Marvelous Land of Oz would feature artwork by John R. Neal, who would go on to work on over 40 Oz books, including all of the rest of them that were written by Baum during his lifetime. The events of the second Oz book are set shortly after Dorothy departs back to Kansas. But this time, our protagonist is a young boy named Tip. Tip is an orphan under the watchful eye of a witch named Mombi. The witch Mombi has always been terrible to poor Tip, and one day he plans a revenge scare. He fashions a wooden man with a pumpkin head that he names Jack. But Mombi is not fooled by the wooden man and uses her new powder of life to bring the pumpkin head to life. She then threatens to turn Tip into solid marble for having planned such a dubious act. Tip steals the powder of life and animates a wooden sawhorse, and together with Jack Pumpkinhead, they escape into the night. But Tip is separated from his new friends, and alone he meets an all-girl army led by General Ginger, who intends to raid the Emerald City and overthrow the new king Scarecrow. Meanwhile, Jack and the Sawhorse find their way to the Emerald City and meet the Scarecrow. As General Ginger and her crew invade the city, Tip meets back up with Jack and the Scarecrow, and together they all escape on the Sawhorse's back. The group then arrive together in Winky Country, and they meet the Tin Woodman at his castle. With his help, they move to retake the Emerald City, but are intervened by the powers of Mombi. They are then joined by the Wogglebug and by a group of field mice being led by their queen. The queen of the field mice allows the Scarecrow to take several of her soldiers into his straw to conceal them away. And as the group reaches the Emerald City, they are apprehended by Ginger's soldiers, but the mice are released and frighten them away. Still, Tip and his new friends are trapped in the Emerald City without any way to get out. So, with an idea from the brain of the Scarecrow, they build a flying machine out of furniture and escape wildly out of the city with no control of their direction. They land in a jackdaw bird's nest, and the bird makes off with the Scarecrow's straw. Luckily, they can rebuild him out of the paper money that the nest had been made out of. And conveniently, they find wishing pills in the powder of life bottle, which they use to be carried away to speak with Glinda the Good Witch. Now, Glinda tells them that long ago there had been a princess of Oz that had been hidden away named Ozma, the rightful heir to the throne of Oz. Glinda joins Tip and his friends to confront Mombi and to search for the lost queen Ozma. The witch tries to evade them with many tricks, but the Scarecrow unwittingly discovers her disguised as a rose. They chase Mombi then all the way to the border of the Deadly Desert, where Glinda finally apprehends her and forces her to admit what she had done with the lost princess of Oz. As an infant, Mombi had taken Ozma and used magic to transform the girl into a boy named Tip. Tip is shocked at first, but Glinda uses her magic to restore the boy back into Ozma, the lost queen. Ozma takes the throne of Oz, and the Tin Woodman invites the Scarecrow back to Winky Country. The others return home, and Oz is restored to peace under the rulership of the Child Queen, Ozma. The book, when it was finished, was published on July 5th, 1904, to great acclaim and children's adoration. Baum quickly moved to adapt the book into a stage play. But with the first book's play still being in production, its stars refused to sign on to a risky sequel, fearing being typecasted. So, Baum worked furiously to change the play into a separate entity he went on to call the Wogglebug. With the heavy overhauling and absence of main stars of the original play, Baum was forced to omit the characters of Scarecrow and the Tin Woodsman. It featured music by Frederick Chopin and vaudeville star Blanche Deyo in the role of Ozma. But after the changes, the play hardly resembled the book at all, and the play was not successful. Around the time of the release of The Marvelous Land of Oz, Baum began looking into other ways that he could market the book and the stage play. At one point, he even declared his intentions to purchase an island that didn't actually exist, to turn it into a theme park for families to visit. The amusement park would have featured characters in the lands of Oz, but after the failure of the Wogglebug, Baum abandoned his hopes of an Oz park. Although, this dream may have gone on to inspire another creative powerhouse, Walter Elias Disney, and his theme park. One promotional tool that did come to fruition for Baum was Queer Visitors from the Marvelous Land of Oz, a newspaper comic strip with art by Walt McDougall and stories by Baum himself. The strip ran from August of 1904 to February of 1905. With sales numbers up and fan mail continuing to pile in, Baum resigned himself to continue his saga of the Oz stories. The next book in the series would be the first to intentionally set up the stories to be a continuing series of adventures. Much of the third book takes place outside of the Land of Oz, marking another strange shift in tone, where Oz becomes the goal place to be, instead of a dangerous land to escape from. It also marks the return of Dorothy to Oz, and of course, the return of John R. Neal's brilliant illustrations for his second Oz book. Ozma of Oz begins with Dorothy on an ocean journey with Uncle Henry, when a storm blows her out into the sea. The girl gets to relative safety by floating to shore on a wayward chicken coop, which houses a hen within. When the chicken and Dorothy arrive on land, they discover the hen can speak, and that they've washed up in the Land of Oz. Dorothy names the chicken Billina, and together they face the terror of a tribe of rolling creatures called Wheelers. After a narrow escape, they discover a mechanic clockwork man named Tick-Tock. Tick-Tock is one of the first humanoid robots to be seen in literature, although the term robot would not be invented until much later. Tick-Tock tells them they are not actually in the land of Oz, but instead they are in the neighboring land of Ev. This land has been without a ruler since the death of the king and the rise of the malevolent Gnome King. Together, Dorothy, Billina, and Tick-Tock visit Princess Langwidere in her castle and discover that she has a collection of interchangeable heads that she switches out for her own at her leisure. When she says she wants to take Dorothy's head for her collection, Dorothy refuses, and Langwidere locks her in a high tower in a fit of rage. Meanwhile, Ozma of Oz leads her royal court of previously appearing Oz characters across the deadly desert to release the old royal family of Ev from the Gnome King's power. Ozma arrives with her friends and releases Dorothy and her new pals from Langwidere's custody. The entire expedition then makes way for the Gnome King himself. The evil Gnome King reveals that he has turned the royal family of Ev into ornaments to decorate his abode, and proposes that if the people from Oz can guess which ornaments are actually people, he will release them. But should they guess wrong, he will turn them into ornaments one at a time. Ozma, the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and Tick-Tock all guess incorrectly and are transformed. Dorothy, however, guesses right and frees one member of the royal family of Ev. Later that night, Billina overhears the Gnome King and learns how to tell which ornaments are actually people. She also discovers that the Gnome King's power is generated by the magical belt that he wears around his waist. Using this knowledge, she is able to free the Oz people and the people of Ev, and together they capture the magic belt and escape the Gnome King. The royal family of Ev are returned to their throne, and a celebration is held by Ozma and Dorothy at the Emerald City Palace. Ozma decrees Dorothy as a princess of Oz, and Billina elects to stay in the Emerald City, as Ozma uses the magic belt to send Dorothy back to Kansas, where she is reunited with her Uncle Henry. Ozma of Oz was released on July 30th, 1907, and featured the dedication by Baum to all the boys and girls who read my stories. The book sold well and continued the growing popularity of the Oz books. After its release, L. Frank Baum invested in an elaborate musical stage show featuring slides and film that he himself would introduce. The show would be called The Fairy Log and Radio Plays, and it would become one of Baum's biggest financial failures. Although critically acclaimed, the budget of the show was so disproportionate that a sold-out performance still would not be able to break even. The Fairy Log and Radio Plays opened in Grand Rapids, Michigan on September 24th, 1908, and ran for a tour of only 2 months. The film used in the production was colorized by an artist in Paris, and it's sadly lost today. The films were originally accompanied by music written by Nathaniel D. Mann, and is considered to be the earliest documented film score. After the money woes of the production, Baum found he could not pay his debts owed to the production company. This led to financial problems that resulted in Baum selling his royalty rights to many of his early books, including The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. In August of 1911, the once successful L. Frank Baum claimed bankruptcy. Quite ingeniously, however, Baum had transferred many of his possessions into Maud's name. Outside of his clothes, typewriter, and library, which he later argued in court that these remaining items were essential to his occupation, and thus he lost much less than he otherwise might have. Still, the Baum family had run on some bad luck, and Frank would soon face yet another failure. He set about adapting Ozma of Oz into a musical play. However, again, production troubles would lead to many alterations, and the play would not appear on stage until April 2nd, 1913. And then it was retitled The Tick-Tock Man of Oz. Featuring music by Victor Schertzinger and starring James C. Morton as Tick-Tock. It was described as boring and a rehash by critics who greatly preferred the original first Oz play. It would cease production in January of 1914. With these rough couple of years hitting Frank, and with fans seeming to be unwilling to show interest in his other non-Oz related books, Baum was troubled. With his publisher applying pressure for him to return to Oz as well, Baum began work on what would become the fourth book of Oz, Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz. But we'll talk about that next time on The Royal Historian of Oz. I'm Cody Goggin, and I'll see you on the other side of the shifting sands.